The afternoon light streamed through the restaurant windows as it always did. Calm, golden, indifferent. The clinking of cutlery against porcelain created a familiar rhythm. No one paid attention to anything but their own table, until the chair creaked. A woman with white hair sat alone near the window. Her purse was beside her, her hands resting on a napkin. She chewed slowly, gazing outside. She wasn't expecting anyone. She wasn't bothering anyone. But he saw her. A large man, broad shoulders, a voice too loud for the space. He entered as if marking his territory, pushing chairs aside, bumping into tables, laughing to himself. The kind of laugh that doesn't invite, that intimidates. He stopped beside her. "Is this seat taken?" The woman looked up. She didn't answer. She just shook her head. No, she wasn't. He pulled the chair next to her anyway. He sat too close. The smell of cigarettes and cheap alcohol filled the air. "Are you alone, Grandma?" His voice was mocking and drawn out. "Doesn't anyone want you around?" She looked away. She took a deep breath. She continued eating in silence. But her silence wasn't weakness. It was control. The waiter approached cautiously. "Sir, would you like a separate table?" "No. I wish you would disappear." The waiter stepped back. The entire restaurant began to notice. Conversations quieted down. Eyes turned. No one did anything. They just watched, hoping it would pass on its own. But it didn't pass. The man rested his elbow on her table. He picked up the salt shaker. He sprinkled salt on the woman's plate. It was tasteless, wasn't it? "Now it's better." She closed her eyes. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't say a word. Someone whispered, "Someone should do something," but nobody did. And then he smiled. That kind of smile that doesn't come from joy, but from the certainty that no one will stop him. He raised his hand. The sound of the slap echoed like a dry thunderclap. Her head turned to the side. The napkin fell to the floor. The restaurant's breath stopped. And at that exact moment, the front door opened. A man entered. Firm steps. Dense silence around him. Nobody knew yet. But everything was about to change. The man who entered didn't run. He didn't shout. He just stopped at the entrance and watched. He wore simple clothes, a black shirt, dark trousers. Nothing stood out except his posture. Shoulders relaxed, yet ready. A calm, yet weighty gaze. Steven Seagal didn't need to announce himself. The bully was still laughing, looking at the woman as if he had just won a contest that only he knew about. "See?" he said loudly, turning toward the restaurant. "Nobody does anything, because nobody can do anything." People lowered their eyes. Some picked up their cell phones, but only to pretend they weren't seeing. Vicarious embarrassment filled the air like dense smoke. The woman remained motionless. The red mark on her face was beginning to appear, but she didn't cry. She only breathed, slowly, controlled, like someone who already knew pain very well. She had learned not to expect justice. Steven took 3 more steps inside. Still silent. No one recognized him immediately. Hair tied back, gray beard, no spotlights. Just a man entering a restaurant. But there was something about him. The way his eyes scanned the room, the way his footsteps made no unnecessary noise, the complete absence of hurry. The waiter approached, looking nervous. "Sir, would you like a table?" Steven didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the scene in the background. The bully was now fiddling with the woman's cell phone, which was on the table. "Let me see. Who do you call when you get a beating, Grandma?" He unlocked the screen and laughed. "Oh, look at that. My son. How cute." He held his cell phone up in the air, like a trophy. "Where is he? Where is this very special son? Could he be coming to save you?" The woman swallowed hard. For the first time, a tear escaped, but not from fear, from silent anger. And it was at that moment that Steven stopped beside the table. He didn't touch anything. He still hasn't spoken. He just stood there, next to the bully, so close that the man felt his shadow. The bully turned his head slowly, and when their eyes met, something changed. The smile died. The air became thinner. And for the first time that afternoon, the entire restaurant realized Someone with real power had just entered. The bully looked at Stephen as if he were looking at a wall that had appeared out of nowhere. "Can I help you?" His voice tried to sound firm, but it came out trembling at the edges. Stephen didn't answer. He just kept his gaze fixed, heavy, motionless, like a stone that observes without judging, but also without forgiving. The silence lasted 3 seconds. It felt like 30. The big man tried to laugh, but the sound died out mid-sentence. "Relax, man. I'm just talking to this old lady." Stephen tilted his head slightly to the side. Still nothing. Just that unblinking stare. The bully stood up, shoving the chair back forcefully. The thud echoed sharply. He was large, 6'3", maybe more. Broad chest, thick arms, the kind of man used to intimidating with his size. But next to Stephen, he seemed smaller. "Do you have a problem, old man?" The word "old" came out with disdain, but his voice no longer carried the same confidence. Stephen took a step forward. Just one. But it was enough for the bully to back away half a step without realizing it. And then, for the first time, Stephen spoke. The voice was low, calm, sharp as glass. "She is my mother." The entire restaurant froze. Cell phones were raised. Someone started recording. The flash went on and off. No one was breathing heavily. The bully blinked. He tried to process it. He looked at the woman. He looked at Stephen. The penny dropped slowly, like a stone sinking in dark water. I didn't know. Now you know." Stephen took another step. The bully took 2 steps back. "Look, man. It was just a joke." Joke. The word came out of Stephen's mouth as a diagnosis. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. The big man was sweating now. His hands were trembling. He looked around, searching for support, witnesses, anything. But everyone was filming and no one was on his side. He tried to laugh again, but the sound came out broken, desperate. "Oh, man, relax. We'll sort this out all right." Stephen didn't move. He just waited. And the bully, for the first time in a long time, felt what the woman had felt seconds before. The weight of the silence of those who have power, but have not yet decided to use it. The entire room watched. Collective breathing was suspended. The afternoon light still streamed in through the window, but now it seemed different, denser, as if the air had changed texture. And then Stephen took the 3rd step. This time, the bully didn't back down. He froze. Stephen stopped less than a meter from the bully. There was no hurry. There was no visible anger, just presence, dense, inescapable, like gravity. The big man tried to straighten his shoulders, to regain his posture, but his body wouldn't obey. His legs wanted to retreat. His hands searched for something to hold on to. Stephen looked at him as one looks at something already well known, not with hatred, but with complete understanding. He had seen this type of man before, many times. Noise that hides fear. Aggression that disguises weakness. The woman remained seated, the red mark on her face still vivid. But now, for the first time, she raised her eyes, and there was something new in them. Not relief. Not yet. Just recognition. She knew what was coming next. The bully opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He tried again. "Look, I didn't mean to." Stephen raised his right hand, slowly. Just raised it, palm open, fingers relaxed. The gesture was so simple that it seemed harmless, but the big man recoiled as if he had seen a weapon. "I'm leaving, okay? I'm leaving now." Stephen lowered his hand, and then he spoke, with the same calm as someone reading a menu. "You hit her. It wasn't a question. It was simply the truth, presented as an indisputable fact." The bully shook his head in despair. "It was an accident, man, I swear." Without wanting to, Stephen repeated the words as if testing their weight, and they couldn't bear it. "You raised your hand. You chose your target. You slapped." He paused. None of this was accidental. The restaurant was now completely silent. Even the waiters had stopped moving. Someone was holding their breath. Another was adjusting their phone to get a better shot. The bully looked around, searching for a way out, physical or moral. But there was neither. Stephen took a half step to the side, making space. You can leave now. The man blinked, confused. What? You can leave. The door is right there. For a second, the bully hesitated. It seemed too easy. It seemed like a trap. But he took the first step towards the exit. And then Stephen spoke again, softly, firmly, like someone closing a door. But first, you're going to do one thing. The man froze in the middle of the road. You're going to look at her. And you're going to apologize. The bully turned his head slowly. He looked at the woman. She stared back at him, without fear, without pleading, just waiting. He opened his mouth. He tried to speak, but his shame was greater than his words. And Stephen, still standing there, just watched. No rush, no doubt about it, like someone who knows that justice doesn't need noise, only presence. The bully looked at the woman. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Shame outweighed ego. He looked away, took a deep breath, and took a step toward the door, quickly, as if fleeing from something invisible. But Stephen moved. It wasn't a blockade. It wasn't aggression. It was just a sideways step, placing oneself in the way, calm, unavoidable. The bully stopped. Dude, I already said that. You still haven't apologized. Stephen's voice was the same, calm, firm, but now he carried something new, a line that could not be crossed. The big man tried to go around him. Stephen moved again, blocking the passage without touching him. Get out of the way. Apologize. I am not going. And then the bully made the mistake. He pushed Stephen across the chest, with force, pent-up anger, despair disguised as courage. Stephen didn't even flinch. The man blinked, confused. He pushed again, harder. Nothing. It was like pushing against a wall. And it was at that moment that Stephen grabbed his wrist. The movement was so quick that no one saw it properly. Only the result. The bully's arm was trapped, bent backward, immobilized in a hold that didn't hurt, but took away all control. The big man tried to break free. He couldn't. He tried using his other arm. Stephen effortlessly dodged and adjusted his grip. Now the bully was lying on his side, leaning forward, breathing rapidly, sweat dripping down his forehead, and Stephen wasn't even breathing heavily. I can squeeze harder, Stephen said softly near his ear. Or you can do the right thing. The entire restaurant watched in silence. Cell phones captured every second. Flashes blinked. Someone whispered, "My God." So softly it was almost inaudible. The bully tried to resist, but his body had already made up its mind. He was doomed. Stephen increased the pressure slightly, just enough for the man to feel the limit. Last time. Apologize. The bully closed his eyes. His breath came out shaky. And then, finally, his voice came out, low, broken, defeated. Sorry. Stephen hasn't let go yet. Looking at her. The man opened his eyes. He turned his head with difficulty. He met the woman's gaze. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She just observed, like someone who sees something they already expected, but that still needs to be said. I'm sorry, he repeated, this time looking directly at her. I was wrong. The words came out harsh. True now. Not because he wanted them to, but because the truth could no longer be avoided. Stephen released his wrist. The bully staggered forward, massaging his arm. He looked at Stephen one last time, not angrily, with something worse, recognition. He had seen his limit, and it was far beyond what he imagined. The door was open. He stepped out slowly, his shoulders hunched, the noise he made when entering now replaced by a heavy silence, and the restaurant continued watching. But now, it was Stephen who was in control of the airwaves. The bully stopped at the door. He didn't leave. He just stopped, his hand on the doorknob, his body turned toward the street, but his feet still planted on the ground. Stephen didn't follow him. He just watched, motionless, like someone waiting for something inevitable. The man was breathing heavily. His chest rose and fell too rapidly. He looked outside. Freedom was right there, just 2 steps away. But something held him back. It wasn't fear. It was shame. He turned his head slowly. He looked back, at the woman, at Stephen. at the people who were still holding their cell phones, recording every second. And then he saw what everyone else saw. The red mark on the woman's face, the napkin still on the floor, the chair he had pushed, the salt scattered on her plate. He had done all of that, in front of everyone, and he had laughed. Now, nobody laughs. The bully lowered his head. His hands trembled. He let go of the doorknob, and he returned. Slow steps, heavy, like someone carrying something invisible, but heavier than any physical weight. Stephen didn't move. He just watched. The man stopped in front of the table. He looked at the lady. This time, without defiance, without mockery. Just a man in front of another human being. His voice faltered. He swallowed hard, tried again. I shouldn't have done that. The woman didn't answer. She just looked at him, not angrily, not forgivingly, just wearily. The kind of exhaustion you get from seeing this scene before, from being disrespected, ignored, belittled so many times that an apology doesn't erase anything. But she nodded, once, briefly. The bully picked up the napkin from the floor. He put it back on the table. He straightened the chair he had pushed. He picked up the salt shaker and tried to wipe the salt off his plate, but his hands were shaking so much that he gave up. Stephen stepped forward. The man instinctively recoiled, but Stephen didn't touch him. He simply picked up the plate. He stood up. He took it to the counter and ordered another from the waiter, calmly, without rushing. He returned with a clean plate. He placed it in front of the lady. She looked at her son. For the first time, something changed on her face. It wasn't a smile, but it was closeness. Stephen pulled up a chair next to him and sat down, slowly, as if nothing had happened, as if this had always been the plan. The bully was still standing, lost, not knowing whether to stay or go. Stephen looked at him, not with anger, not with contempt, just with clarity. You can go now. This time, it wasn't a threat. It was permission. The man nodded. He turned around. And he left. The door closed slowly behind him. And then, finally, the restaurant breathed a sigh of relief. Someone put their phone down. Another put it away. A couple at the corner table exchanged glances. The waitress started moving again. Stephen took his mother's hand. He squeezed it lightly. She squeezed back. There was no speech. There was no explanation. Just a son beside his mother, eating in silence, while the world around them returned to normal. But nothing was normal, because everyone there had just witnessed something unusual. Justice without vengeance, strength without violence, respect without words. And the echo of that would continue long after everyone had left. Outside, the bully stopped on the sidewalk. The sunlight beat down brightly. The noise from the street, cars, horns, voices, seemed distant, muffled, as if he were underwater. He leaned against the restaurant wall. His legs gave way. He slid down until he was sitting on the floor, his back against the rough brick. He took a deep breath, but the air wasn't filling properly. He looked at his own hands. They were still trembling. He clenched his fists, trying to control them. But the trembling only worsened. She ran her hand over her face. Cold sweat. Her skin was warm, but cold inside. He tried to remember how he had entered that place, full of himself, laughing loudly, master of the space. Now he seemed like a different man, smaller, older, more tired. A woman walked past him on the sidewalk. She glanced at him. She quickly looked away. He noticed, and for the first time, understood what it meant. She was afraid of him, not because he was dangerous, but because he seemed unstable, lost, the kind of man people crossed the street to avoid. He always thought that was respect. Now I knew it was the opposite. A boy ran past, tripped close to him. The mother quickly pulled the boy by the arm, protectively. She didn't even look at the bully. She just moved her son away and continued on her way. He lowered his head. He remembered his father, his deep voice, always drunk, always shouting. A man who doesn't command respect isn't a man. How many times had he heard that? How many times had he believed it? He had spent his entire life trying to be the man his father said he should be. And now, sitting on the floor, sweaty and defeated, he finally understood. That was never respect. It was fear. And fear builds nothing. It only pushes people away. Inside the restaurant, he had seen something different. Stephen didn't yell. He didn't curse. He didn't humiliate. He just stood there, calm, present, unwavering. And everyone stopped to look, not because they were afraid, but because they recognized something real. The bully closed his eyes. The image of the woman returned, her face, the red mark, her tired gaze. She hadn't reacted. She hadn't cried aloud. She had simply absorbed it, as if I had expected it. And that hurt more than any punch, because he knew, deep down, he always knew. He was the kind of man who made people expect the worst. A car drove slowly past. Loud music, laughter. The sound faded into the distance. He stood there, alone, listening to his own breathing. And then, for the first time in years, he cried. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't noisy. Just silent tears streaming down a dirty face, falling onto the hot pavement. He didn't know if it was regret, if it was shame, if it was anger at himself. Perhaps it was all together. But one thing he knew now, with painful clarity, he had become exactly the kind of man he himself would have avoided. And that, more than any arm lock, more than any harsh look, broke him inside. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. He stood up slowly. His legs were still trembling. He looked at the restaurant door. He thought about going back, apologizing again, really this time. But I knew he wasn't going to. Not yet. Maybe never. He turned his back and started walking, slowly, aimlessly, just away. But the wait remained, and he knew it would continue for a long time. Inside the restaurant, the silence still weighed heavily, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not one of tension, one of respect. Stephen remained seated beside his mother. He didn't touch his cell phone. He didn't look around. He just stayed there, present, as if that were the only place he should be. The woman looked at the clean plate in front of her. Then she looked at her son. "You didn't need to come," she said softly. Stephen turned his head toward her. His eyes were calm, but steady. "I always need it." She smiled, small, tired, but real. Stephen gestured to the waiter. The young man approached, still nervous, but respectful. "Bring her the dessert menu." The waiter nodded quickly and returned with the menu. He placed it carefully in front of the lady, as if he were handing her something fragile. She flipped through the pages slowly. Her fingers still trembled slightly. Stephen noticed. He placed his hand over hers, firm but gentle. "Choose whatever you want, Mom." She looked at him, and for the first time since it all began, her eyes sparkled. Not tears, something deeper, silent gratitude. She pointed to the chocolate cake on the menu. Stephen called the waiter back. 2, and a coffee for her. The waiter took note and left. But before leaving, he stopped and looked at Stephen. "Sir, thank you." Stephen simply nodded. No words, no need for them. Around them, people began to return to their conversations, but their gazes still lingered on the corner table, not with intrusive curiosity, but with something akin to admiration. A woman at the next table leaned toward her friend and whispered, "That's what my father always said. A real man protects, he doesn't intimidate." The friend silently agreed. An older gentleman, standing alone near the window, raised his coffee cup toward Stephen, a discreet toast. Stephen returned the gesture with a slight nod. The waiter returned with the desserts. He carefully placed the plates on the table. The cake was perfect. Dark layers, shiny frosting, a generous slice. The woman picked up her fork, but before she could eat, she stopped. "You've always been like this," she said, looking at Stephen, calm but present. Stephen didn't answer. He just looked at her with that complete attention that few people know how to give. She cut a piece of cake. She brought it to her mouth. She closed her eyes as she chewed. "It is good." She nodded. She smiled again. This time, wider. Stephen picked up his own fork. They ate in silence, not the silence of discomfort, but the silence of true companionship. Meanwhile, the restaurant returned to its normal rhythm. Dishes were being served. Conversations resumed. Quiet laughter. Life went on. But something had changed. The people inside wouldn't forget what they had seen. Not the violence that was avoided, not the defeated man, but the son sat next to his mother. The man who could have destroyed but chose to protect. The strength that didn't need to prove anything, because it already knew who it was. Stephen finished his dessert. He wiped his mouth with his napkin. He looked at his mother. Ready to go? She nodded. He stood up first. He carefully pulled out her chair. He offered her his arm. She held on. And together, they walked to the cashier. Stephen took out his wallet. He paid the bill, hers and the bully's, who had left without paying. The cashier blinked, surprised. "Sir, you don't need to." "I know." Stephen took the change. He left a generous tip. And he left with his mother, slowly, through the same door the bully had gone through minutes before. But their way out was different, without shame, without haste, without burden, just silent dignity. And when the door closed, the entire restaurant continued watching, not because there was anything left to see, but because they wanted to remember how it felt. The restaurant door closed. Stephen and his mother walked along the sidewalk, slowly, without haste, as if they knew that time now belonged to them. Inside, the silence lasted for another 3 seconds. Then, someone clapped their hands. Once, twice, 3 times. Other hands joined in. The sound grew. It wasn't loud. It wasn't theatrical. It was genuine, respectful, applause that stemmed from something rare, witnessing dignity in action. The waitress discreetly wiped away a tear. The cashier lowered his head, still processing. The man at the window continued looking out at the street, but now with a small smile, as if he had just witnessed something worth remembering. And then, cell phones came back. But now was not the time to record conflict. It was time to share a lesson. A young woman in her early 20s was typing quickly, posting the video she had recorded. The caption read, "Today I saw a man protect his mother without having to shout. That's true strength." The video went up. 10 views, 50, 200. In less than an hour, it had surpassed 1,000. Comments started to appear. "My God, is that Steven Seagal? What a legend. He didn't even need to hurt the guy. He just showed who's in charge." The way he sat next to his mother at the end, I cried. This should be taught in schools. Respect isn't noise. The video continued to grow. 5,000, 10,000, 20,000. Someone reposted it with the phrase, "Violence solves everything." No, presence solves everything. Another person shared, "You can be strong without being violent. You can protect without destroying. That's the difference between a man and a boy." A mother posted, "I showed this to my 14-year-old son. He watched it 3 times and asked me, 'Mom, can I be like that?' I replied, 'You must be like that.'" The video crossed borders. Subtitles in Spanish, in French, in Portuguese. 50,000 views, 100,000, 200,000. Influencers picked up on the story. News channels mentioned it. Podcasts debated it. But what was most striking wasn't the arm lock. It wasn't the confrontation. It was the final dinner. Stephen sat next to his mother. They both ate cake in silence. His hand rested on hers. That hit me hard, because everyone knew someone like that. A mother, a grandmother, someone who had already been disrespected and no one did anything about it. And now, for a moment, everyone could imagine, what if it had been my mother? What if someone had been there? The comments continued. I cried. "My mother was bullied on the bus last week and no one did anything. Thank you for showing that there are still people like that. My father passed away last year. He was like that, calm but firm. This video reminded me of him. No matter how many times I watch it, I always get emotional, because that's what the world needs." The video reached 1 million views, and it continued to climb. News reports began trying to locate Stephen. Some said he was in Los Angeles, others in Arizona. Nobody knew for sure, and he didn't give any interviews. He didn't post anything. He simply went on with his life, as he always had. But the impact remained. Schools began using the video in ethics classes. Parent groups discussed it in meetings. Martial arts academies showed it to students, saying, "That's control, that's discipline. That's what we teach here." The video became a symbol, not out of revenge, not out of justified violence, but something simpler and more powerful, being there when it matters. And in every view, in every comment, every time someone shared it, saying, "Everyone needs to see this," the echo of that moment in the restaurant continued to travel, touching people who have never been there, changing the minds of those who have never seen Stephen live, inspiring children to protect their mothers, and reminding the world of something everyone knew, but few practiced. Respect doesn't shout. It's simply there, firm, calm, unwavering. And when action is needed, action is taken. No noise, no ego, no hesitation, just being there. 3 weeks later, the video had already surpassed 5 million views, but Steven Seagal didn't know. Or if he did, he didn't care. He was at another restaurant, another state, another ordinary afternoon. He sat alone at a table near the window, reading an old book on Eastern philosophy. The coffee beside him was getting cold. He turned the pages slowly, absorbing each line. The door opened. A young man entered, 18, maybe 20 years old. Baseball cap backwards, headphones around his neck, cell phone in hand. He looked around. He saw Stephen. He stopped. She walked to the table. She stopped in front of him, hesitant. Stephen looked up from his book, not in irritation, just attentively. "Sir," the boy began. He swallowed hard. "I saw the video." Stephen said nothing. He just waited. I've done that before. Not exactly that, but I've disrespected people before. I thought it was funny, that it made me seem strong." He lowered his eyes. "But after I saw the video, I realized I was the wrong guy in the story." Stephen closed the book slowly. He looked at the boy, not judgmentally, just listening. "And what did you do?" The young man took a deep breath. "I apologized. To 3 people. It was incredibly difficult, but I did it." Stephen nodded once, small, but enough. "This is stronger than any punch." The boy smiled, shyly, relieved. "Thank you, sir." He turned to leave, but Stephen spoke again. "No." The young man stopped. "Keep doing it, not because it's easy, but because it's right." The boy waved. He left. The door closed behind him. Stephen went back to the book, but he didn't continue reading yet. He just looked out the window. He saw the boy cross the street, stop, help a lady carry bags to her car. Stephen smiled, small, almost invisible. Then he went back to reading. That same week, in a different city, a teacher showed the video to her high school class. When she finished, she asked a simple question. "What did you see here?" A student in the back raised his hand. "I saw a guy who didn't need to shout to be heard." Another student added, "I saw someone who protected without destroying." The teacher nodded. "And what does that teach us?" Silence. But it wasn't emptiness, it was thought. Then a girl in the front row spoke softly. "We choose the kind of person we're going to be, every day." The teacher smiled. "Exactly." Elsewhere in the country, a 40-year-old man watched the video for the 4th time. He had been that bully, not in that restaurant, but in other places. At other times, he picked up his cell phone. He opened his contacts. He looked for a name he hadn't dialed in years. "Mother." It played 3 times. She answered. "Hello? Mom." He took a deep breath. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, for everything." On the other end, silence. Then, a trembling voice. "Son, thank you." He hung up. He rubbed his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something like peace. The video continued to circulate, but now it wasn't just about Steven Seagal. It was about everyone who saw and decided to change, regarding children who called their mothers, about men who apologized, about young people who chose respect over noise, about ordinary people who noticed, True strength lies not in dominating. It lies in protecting. True courage lies not in winning. It lies in choosing the right path. True respect doesn't come from being feared. It's about being remembered. Not for what you destroyed, but for what you preserved. Steven Seagal finished his coffee. He paid the bill. He left a tip. He left the restaurant as he had entered, quietly, without fanfare. Just a man walking down the sidewalk. But the echo of what he did that day continued to travel, touching people he would never otherwise meet, changing lives he would never otherwise see, and teaching a lesson the world needed to hear. Silence also speaks, and sometimes it speaks louder than any shout. Respect is not imposed, it is inspired. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like to help me out, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future content. Comment below what you thought and share it with someone who might also like it.